I know there might be a sports competition that people may be interested in this evening regarding a local sports team. Roll call or attendance?
Everyone,
Oh, is he? Okay. All right. So we do have a quorum. We will go to item C, which is approval of the minutes from our meeting on the 16th of September.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. Are there any adjustments or amendments to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Then we'll move to item D, number 2, the 2020 through 2024 Capital Improvement Program, Draft 2. Yes.
At the last meeting, Peggy provided a sheet of items that we had in that there was no funding source identified, and we went through several of those and talked over either them being held or not held, and I put together another sheet today that's with blue and gray and egg yolk yellow.
Colors.
Try to be brand consistent.
That's Packer Gold, that's not egg yolk yellow.
Okay, Packer Gold.
All right, I'll be quiet now, sorry.
Marquette Golden Eagles.
I like that one too.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, so those are all out.
Brewers Gold.
So the bluish ones are ones we talked about last time and said, and so I updated the sheet according to what we talked about. The ones in gray, we had talked about before that meeting, so we already made decisions. And then the remaining ones in, I'm not sure what color to call it now, the grayish color and white were those were the remaining ones. So put together a recommendation as to what we should do with the remaining ones, and the ones that are highlighted in yellow, recommending that whatever thing is listed, that we do those things, and we could go through each of those if you wanted to. The bottom line is we don't have money for carryover very much, and so keeping that relatively low is something that we are going to need to do in order to accommodate our limitations. So I don't know what you want me to, the best way to do this.
What's the committee's preference on going through this?
So,
Don't all jump at once. Is that fair?
It's not,
what kind of number are we working with?
0, but, so probably at least under 300, maybe closer to 250.
So
So
how
I
many
have
zeros
it
and what
at-
number comes in front of it?
Yeah, we don't. What is recommended here is it would be $263,170, but we could go through the different items, because the committee might have a different feeling about them.
I have a couple things. The CDBG projects that we talked about last time were the first one, the bike and ped infrastructure. So I think,
In the farmer's market.
yeah, and then I think the other ones we put in there were the Boulevard landscape bed and the Emerald ash borer preemptive. We talked about those three things being either CDBG or other funds. Then, yes, the farmer's market, Burnham Point, we already have that in there. And I think that's it.
So those 4 items should be CDBG.
So that was bike and ped infrastructure, boulevards, consolidation.
Yeah.
But I can't say that the Boulevard could be CDBG because I don't know where they are.
Actually, it's CDBG or another reserve
Right.
fund, and those two are other reserve funds.
So if I may, the locations or proposed locations for the Boulevard conversion would be 92nd Street, Lincoln to Oklahoma, Lapham, 92nd, 84th Street, and 124th in Cleveland would be the
I
Boulevard.
would just you have to email those to me tomorrow
Yeah.
and I can look them up.
So I know you do help Patrick fund with the trees as well, with CDBG funding, so this would be in addition to?
And this is
That
not the
as well?
normal funding, right?
Okay.
So taking the Emerald Ash Borer and the Boulevard out lowers it to 237.20. If we go with what's in here, so. You want me to go through each line?
Sure, briefly zip through, yeah.
So the, change the bike and ped to CDBG, then the next one is the low-pressure sodium bulb. That was 1.8 million. We're suggesting that that be referred to the Common Council for financing decisions. That would be probably something that we need to borrow to do. Or cut something significantly out to do that.
That makes sense to me. That sounds good to me.
Okay.
Alderman Roth's going to vote for it too, so we
Okay,
got that
good.
covered.
You're on YouTube now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the next two white, the ones that have no coloring, those were reserves. And then the playground improvement, playground inspection, suggesting that that be funded with carryover. That was funding based, there was inspections done by our insurance company that found that we needed to do those improvements at the playgrounds. So. Anyone? Okay. Then the next one is the police facility chiller failure. So the police department's probably happy that it's getting cooler outside. I don't know.
If you dress like that every day, you're gonna be hot. Take the coat off.
54 degrees in my office this morning.
Oh, so it's too cold. Okay.
And you
Cross
wanna
that
chill-
chiller
Just
right
cross
off.
it off.
Okay. So we're trying to find some funding before the carryover for that. If that's not available, we'll probably have to use a reserve or something, I don't know.
And we do have that 124 you said from the traffic controllers that we're not doing, so.
It'll be,
Fair
won't be the
portion of it.
total, yeah. So it'll be less than the 225.
Yes. Be about 185.
185.
So, then the next areas of, the goldish color, the fire HVAC. Suggesting that we use a reserves or contingency if we need to. The Burnham Point,
Can I just chime in on the HVAC? So that's one that I hope this committee does give serious consideration to. I've got no problem pushing the engine off for a year or the small vehicle, but that's one thing that I get feedback from our guys every day, you know. If it was my house or any one of your houses, you would have that fixed if you lived in those conditions. And our folks live there 1/3 of their lives and it's staffed 24 hours a day. So, yeah, whether it's through this process or contingency funds, I ask that it be addressed this year.
Okay.
Which station is that, Mason?
Station 3 on Highway 100.
Oh, I see it now. Thank you.
Lapham.
And then the Burnham Point should be listed as CDBG. The downtown banner poles, I would suggest that we would not fund those.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And then the health department suggests that we would use reserves or contingency if we need to do the repairs, as well as for the library. And the Historical Society, we had talked about maybe using CDBG, but I don't know if there's any funding left after those other items.
I think we put the 50 in there, so we knocked it down from the 128 to 50 and said that we could fund those. We put the rest on hold. Or I'm sorry, put the rest to 2021.
And the Jefferson School substation, use the reserves. City Hall Public Works construction, also refer that to the Common Council for financing decisions. Moving down to concrete saw, provide funding if there's funding with carryover. Then electronic parking citations, security camera. We don't need the DocuWare, so we can take that out. Office 365 and the electronic poll books. Then the virtual city hall, we could use reserves for whenever we have a decision regarding software. And then fire pickup truck, recommend holding that for 2021, so. And then on the bottom, if we have extra funding, I put suggestions that would come after. So I don't know if we want to move the fire HVAC up there or what we'd like to do.
So the HVAC might, be a dollar amount up front, but when we started the LED light project a couple of years ago, we had Focus on Energy come through and walk through all of our buildings, and when the guy saw the mess that is the basement at Fire Station 3 and the HVAC system there, he almost had a heart attack and guaranteed that we'll save tons of money by replacing that system. So while maybe it's some money up front, it's going to be a cost savings long term. That plus I did some math on our We Energy's bills. So the electric temporary heat that they run in the wintertime to keep the bathrooms from freezing costs about $200 a month. So it's not huge, but figure it's probably 12 grand a year we're paying on, or $1,200 a year paying extra on electricity bills just to keep the bathroom warm there.
Does anybody else have questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
So I'm okay with, pushing stuff off to the following year, but we already don't have funds this year. Where are we going to have funds next year? Because I understand that, was proposed and passed by the Common Council to increase the levy from 2.75 to 3.75, but my understanding is a lot of that is taken up by roads or by streets. So, that's just something we need to think about. I mean, I feel like last year we said we could do some stuff in the next couple of years, and this year we're again passing it down, but we need to take a serious look next year of what needs to change here.
So each year, each year we've had some type of change to our budget allocations that has allowed us to remain under the expenditure restraint program, where it's been something like an insurance change or something like that. We don't have anything like that this year, so we need to find a rabbit before next year, so we can have another rabbit in our hat. Or we need to, start looking seriously at changing service deliveries, because this is not sustainable.
I think too, some of these items are continual costs that come up, and others are 1 year, like, I can't remember which one I was just looking at, but like HVAC at the fire department, it's not gonna be on next year's, if it's on this year's. So there are some things that come up every 10, 20, 30 years, like roads, and then there are other things that you push them off, obviously they're gonna be there next year.
Yeah.
But you kind of captured it. We've been forced into, which in a good and bad, we've been forced into creativity, and we've been creative, and we've been trying to find fixes year by year to get through, but we're running out of fixes, essentially. And, speaking in a very global sense, there are a lot of services that the city provides that other communities do not. And maybe it's time we start to assess whether we eliminate those or charge extra for those to find a way to keep them. Just the things, not to pick on Public Works, but two that come to mind are plowing alleys and curbside leaf pickup. You don't see that in a lot of cities. And those are things we need to decide if we want to keep. And they're not easy decisions, because every neighborhood with an alley is going to want to keep alley plowing, and everybody who has a driveway and no alley could care less. So that's what's in front of us.
Governor Evers isn't talking about changing the restraint program or something?
Yeah.
It's
Did
been
for 5
talked.
minutes, but.
But then the assembly told them it wasn't going anywhere, or the Senate.
Even if the expenditure restraint program changes, you don't want to be raising the taxes so much
Right.
every year, because if you looked at the population and the poverty, people in poverty here, it's going up $500 or $1,000
Right.
for
And
property
we-
taxes is difficult.
And we did get the first bump in shared revenue in 12 years, was it? Small, but a bump. I mean, it was not a loss, I guess, but then, I don't know, former governor gave us some bumps in transportation aids, but
We got a bump in transportation days as well, but of course, it's kind of taken up when we do the street repairs and things like that.
it was quick.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just a question to better educate myself. So does the commercial reeval help us at all, like raising the property values?
So it really doesn't from that perspective. What it helps is it reslices the pie. So different taxpayers pay different amounts. What it helps us with is to be able to have a little bit more levy without raising our tax rate, but then we're capped by the expenditure restraint. So I shouldn't have said it doesn't. It does. It reshuffles the deck, and it will allow us to use our expenditure restraint capacity, but it doesn't allow us to get extra things, if you will, because that would cause the tax rate to go up.
Then as we see some of this redevelopment going around in the city, and a lot of it's going to be TIF, right?
Right, the majority.
I think though the new psych hospital isn't, is that correct?
It is.
It is as well?
Yeah, UHS is, Ogden is, Mandel is, Cobalt is.
So we're probably a good
Chris
decade out from
Hansen
seeing
is.
the benefits of those.
And what TIFs are close to closing?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask that.
It'd be TIF number 9, which would be Heritage, I think.
Yeah, not a,
Maybe another year.
I think
if I remember
2,
right.
but I think it might be 2 years, but it's not a,
So
what you might
whoever's-
call a cash cow, it's not.
No, it's
So
not
we're
a
sitting
big
here in
TIF.
20 years, they'll be in good
Don't
shape.
be happy.
Yeah, when the ones that are being built right now
Yeah.
go on the tax roll, if they still exist, the values,
they still
if the values are still there, because a lot of times the values are gone by the time the TIF's closed, so, if the values are still there, yeah, it would be a good day at that point.
UHS is located in a TIF, but it's not receiving TIF dollars, just a clarification. Some of these other ones do receive TIF dollars, but that one is not.
So
We
the
use the
tax
TIF
benefit
dollars
is
to
looking at any financing.
do the
There's no
environmental.
tax benefit for it. So yes, it's true what he said, but it doesn't matter because the taxes all go to the TIF.
Oh, I see.
And
So, I
it
mean,
supports
some of
other
the-
things.
Sorry, some of the smaller things are without TIFs, but again, it's not, I don't think we can honestly say we're in a situation where we can develop or tax our way out of the hole. I think that's.
So at least,
dishonest.
yeah, I think so too.
So,
I just have one suggestion. So a lot of communities will borrow for some of these things, so I don't know if that would be something we would be interested in talking to council about. We have a very tight operating budget this year as well, and so all of the capital outlay that was essentially in the operating budget is no longer in it. So this might be a year, at least to start the conversation with council, to talk about the possibility of perhaps we raised it $1 million for streets, but maybe we need to have $750,000 or something of that nature to do some of these things that are emergencies. I didn't add up all the ones that say reserve or contingency, but without having remainder funds left in this budget, what's going to happen is that's going to lower our fund balance, which is going to set off some other financial triggers. So the more we can not reduce our fund balance, the better off we're going to be from a external financial status perspective. So it might be time to consider borrowing for some of these items. I know there's not been a large appetite for that, and you do have to pay it back, so that means interest and increased tax rate for that, but sometimes it's a more palatable way, and under the state restraints, that doesn't exist. You know, it's
That
not
was-
restraining the capital side of things, so that might be something, and it would still be a some certain amount of money, but at least we could look at getting some of these higher priority items done.
Rob Hankin was speaking at the ICC today, and he said one of the trends they've been seeing in the recent years is just municipalities are just borrowing more. It's been going up, and this is exactly why.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a perfect solution, it's
Right.
just the solution that communities have had to go to in order to maintain infrastructure and still meet the restraint caps. I mean, if we don't meet the restraint caps, we're looking at $1.6 million immediately that we would lose in expenditure restraint money. We can't, that's not even a consideration for us.
The reserve contingency, just doing quick rough math, it's about 320 is what it comes out to.
300 and?
320.
That's without the streetlights.
Oh, I
Yeah, I
thought,
just did the 4 items, so the
Say contingency.
HVAC,
oh, so, and then if you add like the reserves, the virtual city hall reserves, that's another 300. I thought it came up to like 6 or 7, but
oh, that reserves, yeah. So that's 620, 625.
So, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Haas.
Yeah, I think what Peggy says is correct. I think that the best thing for this committee to do at this point would be to punt to some extent to the council and say, hey, council, these are these things that we need to do that are important things on our list. And council, you need to find something, a more creative way of funding these things. And so we've got 2 big things, and I see them as separate. We've got the street lighting issue, the low pressure sodium. That needs to happen. And then we have these additional capital improvement issues that we have to take we as a council have to take a good look at borrowing for them because of the advantages of borrowing just outlined by Peggy. And I'll include the one that Alderman Weigel always adds too, is that the interest rates are very low right now. The cost of money is low. Now is a time.
So
we need to.
are you asking the council to make a decision on borrowing additional? Is that
I think that's what our committee
direction?
where our committee should go, yes.
Any other discussion?
The question for the Alderman, so would you include the the items that are under the no funding source, the white items that are not CDBG, along with the ones that say reserve contingency, or just those white items, so.
And I'm not saying what we should and shouldn't include. I haven't,
No,
I-
what were you referring to, I guess, this should be my question.
Yeah.
Which items were you referring to?
so the two discrete ones, the low pressure sodium bulbs and that replacement. And then I guess I don't have a number in mind for borrowing. I don't know what items we should necessarily include myself. That's probably something for our committee to do tonight. But yeah, the point is that we should go to the council and say, council, we need to get a little more creative with our financing and do something different than we've normally done. And see what the council says. So I didn't answer your question at all, Cigar.
Well, I'll make a proposal / motion, so, that we recommend to council to fund the following, or find a way to fund the following urgent and important items, and I say the 4 that say reserve contingency, so the HVAC, the health department, the library, and the Jefferson School substation, along with I'll just go through the items. The electronic poll books, the Office 365, the citywide security camera, the electronic parking citations, the concrete saw, and that's it. So, I believe that comes out to, and then what was the other reserve item we talked about? I don't know about the we'll leave the virtual city hall out of it. So that comes out to 320, and I came up with what, 230, so 550, I think. I don't know, Peggy can do the math. People always tell me I'm the math teacher. I say, yeah, but I leave the math teacher at school once I leave.
Same with me, you don't have a heart attack. I'm not helping you, I'm off duty.
Oh, jeez.
I'll call 911.
Yeah.
I'll give myself CPR.
I leave that at home.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
regarding
Yeah.
your input, so regarding the Jefferson School substation, that may be addressed with the future LED conversion. 2 years ago, we did replace that roof, so maybe that's something that we could, defer
Thought we talked about
with
that last
that
time.
and await the conversion of the substation or potential remove of, and save that money for elsewhere.
Well, so being real, there were 3 things I was kind of questionable about, but I just picked everything that was there. So that was one of them. The other one was the concrete saw. I can't remember, is that something we need?
We should be able to find 30 grand somewhere and not put that on a list. No, I've got to stop talking.
And Mr.
Carrying
Mayor,
this-
I guess to answer that, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, we do have a concrete saw that's approximately 18 years old. So we could defer to 1 more year, but again, we're still deferring with that piece of equipment that is used every construction season, every time that we do water cuts, street manholes, sanitary, storm. So I guess you're rolling the dice, when that will.
So when it gets really cold and there's a water main that bursts somewhere, are you using that?
Not necessarily, no. We use the buster, the backhoe. So that would not be used on that. But when we do put the asphalt in, those holes we cut, around that
If
hole.
it does go, there's concrete sawing services you could.
We could rent. We do have manual concrete saws, but again, for that, it takes time for that. But we
Do our
do.
neighboring communities own this equipment we might be able to borrow, or?
We'd have to, check with neighboring communities, but it did have a couple years ago where we needed a part, and we did ask, and it did take a long time to get that rental in place, so.
Because I'm just thinking construction season is coming to an end, because we're at the cold, so. 'Cause it's colder construction, right? The 2 seasons in Wisconsin.
We're switching.
So, and then, sorry, my third thing was, and I'm sorry I missed that meeting where we discussed the electronic parking citation, so could somebody refresh my memory on what?
So the current system for parking citations is that police officers and parking checkers handwrite a ticket. That ticket then goes through about 5 to 7 different hands to do something with it. We're at a point in the police department where we love technology, but technology leads to shockingly more work. The body worn camera program, citizens want images from that. That takes a human to redact it and ultimately release it. So recently, the mayor had a inquiry from a citizen who wanted to pay their parking ticket online. It was 3 days after the ticket was issued, and the ticket was still not in the system because we enter it by hand. Every Monday, when they come into work, you've got Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of tickets built up. It would not be unusual for it to be 5 or 6 days for a ticket to get entered if it's a Friday ticket that's written. The electronic parking citation would essentially, when the ticket is written, it will appear in the online system and be eligible for payment.
Yeah. And I fully understand that because my wife got a ticket because she couldn't pull up her insurance fast enough, and yeah, it took a couple days before she could come in and
Yeah.
and get that taken care of, so. So, that's cost of modernization, so.
Yeah.
So I guess I would amend my motion if we want to remove the Jefferson substation and the concrete saw. But I guess I would make the rest as a motion.
Has everybody got full comprehension of the motion?
So we want to
All
make
right.
the recommendation.
Everybody
to
except
borrow-
Rebecca.
Yes, borrow for the low-pressure sodium, and then also for anything that has reserves listed.
I did not say the low-pressure sodium.
You don't, you just want us to borrow for reserves.
Well, that we recommend as a committee to city council that these are the urgent items. And they need to find funding sources for it. The reason I didn't put the low-pressure bulb in it because I felt like that was already something we had talked about referring to council, whereas these hadn't been talked about. So if that needs to go in it, that's fine with me, but, feel like these 1, 2, 3,
Library, the health department, fire station, HVAC, electronic parking citation, office 365, and poll books,
And the security
and security cameras.
yep.
So that total is 508, 248.
All right, I second that.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Any other questions or discussion?
Just a question on the saw. I do get the point that we should be able to find 30,000, but we can't. So
Okay.
if that's important, I would say we should add it.
Add the saw?
And that would make it 544, 248, but basing on the operating side, if it's that important, I just wouldn't want to leave it to chance.
Let's add the saw. We're up at that amount. The other part about 30,000 is it's not so much to add when you're already at 500.
You want to amend your motion
Yeah, I'll
to
accept that
include the
as-
saw?
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. So we have a amended motion and an amended second.
Second,
Okay.
that amendment.
Any other discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. So we're set? Yeah, Rebecca?
I would suggest that perhaps we make updates to the capital improvement program and send them out to the committee, and committee members can just advise if they have, if it doesn't match what you talked about here.
Let's make sure it's all
Otherwise,
synchronized.
Yeah. That it, we would just refer it to the council once we get concurrence from the committee.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, just a question.
Yep.
Maybe Peggy knows the answer. How much stuff is on the wish list for 2021? Just curious, we're kicking the can down the road on a lot of things.
It
And
doesn't get a ton better, if that's the question.
yeah,
I mean, keep in mind, there's some bigger items in here, but right now, and perhaps one of them happens to be the Public Works facility, so if I take that out, we're looking at about 12 million.
what do we start with this year?
We started at 37 million, city funding 33 million.
Okay.
So we took out about 3 for the streets, another 500-ish thousand for CDBG, and a little bit of reserves. So with this, we're probably up to 5.5-ish ballpark. So, and that's kind of where I was going with the
Yeah, and just to continue that, Peggy, you maybe can answer this right now. Yeah, what about borrowing again for next year? My thought would be that this borrowing is more of a one-time, one-year thing. We want to avoid borrowing next year. Can you forecast where we would be on that next year?
So I think there's a couple things. First of all, we have to keep in mind what our long-term needs are. So if we're going to have a big borrowing coming up in the next, let's say, 5 years for something like a public works facility, we're going to want to limit ourselves a little bit more because we're at about 80-ish million. Our capacity is 200. The goal, when we talked about the audit, is somewhere around 50%, but I would say up to 60-ish% of capacity is acceptable. But just by borrowing an extra million for streets, over 10 years, that puts us at 10 million higher than before. So now we're already in the 90s, 90 million borrows. So we do have to look at it from a threshold perspective. On the flip side of that, we borrow every single year for things like this. It's the only way to get some of these things done. In fact, we had capital purchases, capital outlay in our operating budget much longer than I've ever seen at another municipality. So there's something there, but then the bad part of it is we're not used to borrowing, and we're also not, our tax rate is such that it's a substantial amount without a borrowing. Now, if you throw a borrowing into it and you have to pay, an additional couple $100,000 a year in repayment, that makes your tax rate go up. So it's the willingness to tax, and then watching where we're at from a financial perspective. So could we do it again next year? I think we could. I think we just have to keep our eye on what our long-term.
Okay, thank you.
I think at some time the tough choices have to get made. I mean, we just can't keep punting and punting and punting when our operating budgets are stretched as thin as they are this coming year. And then we got a bunch of department heads that sit around the table and nobody's willing to take anything off the list. Well, then at some point, the mayor and city administrator and the people that make the decisions have to say, all right, well, then we're not gonna do X, Y, and Z anymore, whatever X, Y, and Z is. I found this, I'm gonna vent a little bit, I found this process the past few months extremely frustrating, coming here and watching, people put in a position to make tough decisions, and then nobody willing to step forward and make any concessions.
One of the things we're gonna be putting in the budget.
There's been some reductions.
Oh, there have.
Yeah.
People have all made sacrifices. One of the things in the budget is kind of a service delivery strategic action team, I guess, was what we.
Structural deficit action.
Yeah. We're gonna put together basically a think tank, I think would be a term, to scrutinize and analyze everything we provide, and if we're doing it the best we can and in the most efficient manner, and if it's necessary. And kind of echoes back to what I said earlier regarding, some of the Cadillac services that we're providing, and if those will continue. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Just, putting together some city people, but some also residents that have an understanding of somewhat about city services. So someone from the library board, someone from the PSC, someone from this committee, to make suggestions like you were talking about before, not doing curbside pickup, or looking at, we do a lot of things that other municipalities don't do and haven't done for decades. So, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but we're gonna be sitting here.
It's time to make the decisions.
We have to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, the last 2 weeks have been not fun. So people that weren't contacted by me or didn't have an idea, we had to find about over $3 million from our general fund budget to cut out. So.
Yeah. This is part of it.
It's coming, everything's coming, we need to, it has to be done.
And while we're talking about it, that's, I think, part of the reason there's that discussion going on right now about raising the sales tax in Milwaukee County and having a referendum on that, which would shift some of the spending on the property tax side to, bringing in new money from all the people that are visiting and spending money here would contribute towards the services that they're using while they're here. And I know it's not perfect, but this is the 30,000-foot view, is that we're way too dependent on property taxes in the state of Wisconsin. And I've said it, I've been saying it for years, and it's not changing, unfortunately, but 10 years ago, we were one of 2 major transit systems in the country that funded through property taxes. And I think the other one was at the time in Indianapolis. So Milwaukee County buses were paid for or subsidized by property taxes, which just does not happen anywhere else. So we are, as a state, we are so far behind the times on diversifying the funding for the services that we provide on every level. And, it's like a broken record now where, still got that low sales tax, lower than every neighbor by, 1 to 4%. I think Cook County is like 10.5% or something like that, and we're sitting here at 5.6. Minnesota's around, don't quote me on these numbers, but Minnesota's around 7, Indiana's around 6.5, Michigan, everyone around us has a higher sales tax. So.
I was just down in Kansas City, and I tell friends growing up in Missouri, I was just used to a 7.5%, 8% sales tax.
Yeah.
But property taxes are a third of what they are here.
Yeah. And everyone loves to tell you what their property taxes are in state X compared to what we pay here in Wisconsin, but then they don't tell you that it's $480 to register your vehicle, and they don't tell you that the sales tax is 9%, and they don't tell, there's a lot. So anyway, we're kicking around a dead horse here, but is there anything else then on item 2 that we should discuss? Or questions? If there's nothing, then I believe we can move on to the playground inspection results. If that's,
Probably the rest of these could be just placed on file.
okay.
Move to place item 3, 4, and 5 on file.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. The items are placed on file. I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned.